Hey, how's it going, everybody? Thanks for tuning in this week. My name is Kevin Fleich, and this is the Wounded by War Facebook Live broadcast for the week. I'll just give everybody a chance to log on real quick. So, some good news. I only have one final exam left for graduate school. And, nobody is surprised more than I am that I'll be graduating, hopefully, in the next couple weeks, pending a good final exam. When I was a kid, I could barely read till I was 9 years old. And then I used to score on the bottom quarter of all the standardized tests. So if you're a late bloomer, don't worry. There's hope for you out there. A lot of people never gave up on me. Talking about a lot of my teachers out there. Mrs. Carney, you're one. You're my fourth grade teacher. Really taught me how to read, so thank you very much for that. Hey, so I'll just give a quick recap. The first lesson we're talking about basically is the 5 lessons that I learned as a combat wounded Green Beret. And the first lesson was take the hard road, it's worth it. And then lesson 2 from last week was things happen for a reason. And I came to understand that lesson by going through some very difficult Special Forces training, well, the most difficult Special Forces training, and then subsequently going to Afghanistan and understanding that all that training had served its purpose. The reason it was just, the torment was to get me ready to go to war and to be in Afghanistan and prepare me for those rigors. And I said last week that there was a lot of times that I found myself just thanking God that I had trained in the severest of schools. Because if I hadn't been trained in such difficult manners, then like when my teammates counted on me, I just would have quit. And so with a couple of weeks left in my first deployment to Afghanistan, I found myself once again in a situation where I was thanking God that I had had such difficult training. We had probably about 2 or 3 weeks left in the deployment when an order came down for us to do a helicopter assault on a highly contested Taliban-held village, about an hour south of our base. And with 2 or 3 weeks left in your deployment, at least for me, the last thing I wanted to do was do a helicopter assault into enemy territory. What I really preferred on doing was packing my boxes and getting the heck out of Afghanistan and going home and seeing my wife. But, I learned at that point, sometimes in the Army, you have to do things you don't want to do. And so as the mission started to become more and more serious, we actually knew it was going to happen, started planning for it, reading intelligence reports. And the more we read up on the mission, the more that we understood that it was going to be a pretty difficult mission. So, when we went to go brief the Afghan commandos about the mission, the look in their faces said even more than the intel reports could say. This was going to be a very difficult and possibly treacherous mission. And in fact, I had actually never seen the Afghan commandos plan that much for a mission. And one of the things that I saw with them, just the attention to detail that we had asked them to do for the past 6 months, they were finally putting into this. And it was kind of scared me that they were starting to do everything that we'd asked them to do. And so with all the planning that took place and the rehearsals and everything, the night before the mission finally came, I was trying to get some sleep. I knew how big the mission was going to be, but I couldn't sleep because I was just thinking about everything that could possibly happen the next day. And then I started to think about everything that that could go wrong and the people that counted on me and the seriousness of it. And I really thought there was a good chance that something might happen to me or one of my teammates on the mission. And so, at 26 or 25 years old, I wrote a death letter home to my family because I just thought that there's such a good possibility of something like that happening. Basically saying all the things that you would want to say to your family if you died, and left the letter on the desk in my room just in case something happened to me. I thought that somebody would find the letter if I did indeed die, and they would give it to my family. And when we took off for the mission, it was a little bit before the sun had came up. And when we landed, it was just after the sun had crusted over the mountaintops. And this was July in Afghanistan. And so keep in mind, by the time we landed, just as the sun came up, it was almost 90 degrees already. And we're also wearing 80 pounds of gear, helmets. And the last thing I want to be doing in heat like that is doing a mission in enemy-held territory wearing that amount of gear. But at some points too, during the days in July, it got up to about 110 degrees. And about 1 hour into this mission, And also, too, for this week, I forgot to mention it earlier, I thought that some visual aids might help out quite a bit for this. So this is something you might be able to check out right now if you go to www.woundedbywar.com and you click on blog. You'll be able to, lesson number 3 is up, and I have a session of pictures up there that might help to illustrate this talk a little bit more. And if not, you can take a look at them afterwards, and it might illustrate a little bit what I'm talking about here. And so basically, when we landed into on top of a ridge line, and there was a valley underneath the ridge line with a village located there. And it was going to be our job to search that village and to see if anything, talk to people, see what was going on there, kind of find out why the intel reports were so bad. And about 1 hour into the mission, we had our main party down in the village, and then we had our support by fires up on top of the ridgeline. And you'll be able to see this a little bit more clearly with on the woundedbywar.com website, kind of a little bit what I'm talking about and how steep these ridgelines can be. And our support by fire started to take fire from the village. And the fire was so accurate that when one of the members on the support by fire put his hat on a stick and held it up, the Taliban fighter in the village, or one of them, put a hole right through it. You'll be able to see that picture on the woundedbywar.com Facebook or website. And so, as the day went on, the temperature rose, and the fire seemed to pick up also. And about halfway through the day, about 5 hours into this firefight, we've been kind of going on and off with the enemy in the area. The temperature was nearing 120 degrees. It ended up being, luckily for us, one of the hottest days in northern Afghanistan in recorded history. And throughout the day, our support by fire positions are just sitting on top of these ridge lines, completely exposed to the elements. The sun's beating down on them, and they really have no ability to get water resupply, especially when this firefight had broken out. And so they would call in reports to us and let us know what was going on, what they saw, and kind of report back their condition also. And with each successive report, I could hear each one of my teammates' voices deteriorating a little bit more and a little bit more. And each time they called, they had less and less water, to the point that they didn't have water at all anymore. And so 5 hours into this firefight, my senior medic, after what a guy on my team who we call the Fox, after he had called up, my senior medic had made the decision after hearing him on the radio that he needed medical attention right now. But, Fox, very stubborn, typical common trait of the Green Beret, obviously wouldn't admit that, just like every other guy that was on that mission that day. So my senior medic grabs me and tells me that we're going to go up and help out the Fox. I think something's up with him. And we went up the back side of the ridgeline to avoid fire from the front. And by the time we got up the ridgeline, it was just so incredibly steep that I was gasping for air, just completely lost bearings of my surroundings, didn't care at all. And as we're starting to get to the top of the ridgeline and I begin to crest it, the Afghans are yelling at me and they're motioning like this, and I'm just like, what the hell are you guys talking about? And I just, completely just do not listen to them at all. And I exposed myself and started walking on this ridgeline, and next thing you know, bullets just start flying past my head. And I knew exactly what they were telling me. They were saying, hey, stupid, get down. And so after those warning shots, I definitely heeded their advice and got down. Now, this ridgeline, this position was basically, it was like a circular trench on top of the ridgeline with a mound in the middle of the trench. And so my senior medic and I were behind the mound, and we started calling for the Fox. And when the Fox wasn't responding, we knew that something was definitely up with him. So my senior medic starts to prepare his medical gear for treatment, and I have the task of going and running around the running around the trench to go see what's up. And then I also have some pictures up there from this exact spot that I'm talking about that should be able to illustrate this a little bit more for you, just to show you how dire the situation was and how little cover we had. And so, that from that first time to, I think I had to do it 3 or 4 more times, where I had to run back and forth to make sure my teammate was stabilized and bring him back to my medic. Every time that I had to expose myself, it just invited a hail of gunfire from the village, and that's the best way that I can describe it. It was like a movie scene in which bullets just started kicking up dust all around me. Like at one point, I felt like the bullets were so close to me that I could just feel them going past my body. And then when we were there on this ridge line in this trench, we only had about 12 to 18 inches of cover the entire time. And so once we stabilized my teammate and the senior medic was able to provide him some care and push him back a little bit towards safety, that's when I took over this position. And really the only thing that we could do at this position was just kind of lay like this as close to the ground as we possibly could, because every time we exposed ourselves we were getting shot at. So I had about 2 hours or so to kind of think when I was on this ridgeline. We had called for an emergency medevac earlier in the day. However, we had to wait a little bit for it to come, so I had to wait for at least 2 hours on this ridgeline while we waited for the medevac bird, or I'm sorry, the emergency exfil bird to come and pick us up. And it was during this time that I had my first chance to just like think rather than react to what the situation was. And I started to process all the events from the day. I was like, you know, there's only so many times that I can come like this close to getting shot. You know, it happened probably near a dozen times already that day. And you know, it's 120 degrees. We're running out of water. We've been fighting all day long. If I don't succumb to the bullets, I'm going to succumb to the heat at some point here. And you know, that's where I started to really think that there was a possibility that my family was going to have to read that death letter that I had written for them. And I started to really think about my life. And I asked myself questions and had a conversation with myself that most people do not have until they're 70, 80, 90 years old. And I asked myself some very serious questions, like, you know, was I the man that I wanted to be? Had I lived my life the way that I wanted to be? Did I practice my faith the way that I wanted to? And I really didn't like a lot of the answers to my questions. You know, I felt like I took my wife, my family, my friends, a lot of my experience for granted in my life. And I was overcome with just a tremendous amount of sadness that, you know, I was most likely going to die there that day, and that I would never see these people before, and that I had taken my one and true life just for granted. And honestly, I was terrified. And I started to wonder if I was going to go to heaven or if I was going to go to hell. And a lot of people ask me now, Kevin, after everything that's happened to you, after going to Afghanistan twice, after seeing everything you've seen, going through everything you've been through, what do you think is the worst thing that could happen to you in life? And I can easily tell you that the worst thing that can ever happen to you in life is when you have that conversation with yourself and you're on what you think is your deathbed and you're asking yourself those very hard questions about your life and you don't like the answer. That will be the worst moment of your life. Now, luckily for me, I mean, I'm standing here, so you can tell that I made it off of that hilltop that day and was luckily able to make it back to our exfil bird and made it back to the base. And when I got back to the base, it was just incredible shock to be in that situation there. You know, I thought that that was going to be some of my last time on Earth. When I saw a picture of my wife that I carried around in my grenade pouch, I thought that was the last time I would see her face. And so once the shock kind of wore off me, I took my gear off, took a shower, I noticed the death letter on my desk, and I realized just how close I had came to actually my family receiving that day. And it felt great to rip that thing up and throw it in the garbage, but I realized that I needed to start living my life like I was going to die tomorrow. And I needed to stop taking things for granted, because there wasn't always going to be the possibility that all of that stuff was always going to be there for me. I needed to take every interaction, everything, and make it just, you know, not take it for granted, and just realize how special life was, especially given the profession that I was in at that time. So now I want to ask you to do something, and it might make you a little bit uncomfortable, but it's an exercise that I like to do once a year now after having that experience. I want you to picture yourself on your deathbed, hopefully later than sooner, surrounded by your family, and I want you to ask yourself, who do you want to be there? And I want to ask yourself, and then I want you to ask yourself, you know, did I live my life the way that I wanted to? Have I left everything the way that I wanted to? Did I achieve everything that I wanted to? And if you don't like the answers that you got back, just like the day that I did, the great thing is you have the rest of your life to go forward and change that. And this is an exercise, like I said, I do every year. And every year it's changed a little bit. Like one of my big things was I thought that I would never be able to have a family. But now that I have a family, one of my things that I think about when I'm doing my deathbed experience is how much I want to be there for my family, and I hope that I can provide for them. So I also want to hear, too, what you have to say. If you feel comfortable about maybe sharing some of your experiences with anything like this, or what your thoughts are on your reflection, please put those in the comments. Any positives and negatives that you thought from this broadcast. Also, make sure to check out www.woundedbywar.com for more information about the story. If you click on the blog, there's some pictures up from this mission that might help you illustrate this a little bit better in your mind. And I hope you tune in next week for lesson number 4. Like us on Facebook, and if you're inspired, please share. Thank you.